Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, wa man tamassaka bi sunnatihi ila yawmiddin. Thumma amma ba'd. We're still speaking about a tremendous topic and a fundamental principle from the fundamental principles of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and that is ta'ah walat al-amr. And this is to obey the ruler. Ta'ah walat al-amr. This is something that is vital, especially in this time in which we live in, and in every time from the times, but particularly in this time in which we live in, where we see a lot of mistakes when it comes to this particular affair. The Imam, Shaykh Ahmad, rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, وَالسَّمَمُ الطَّاعَةِ لِيَئِمَّةِ وَأَمِيرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ الْبَرِّ وَالْفَاجِرِ. He said to hear and obey to the leaders, or to the Imams and the leaders of the Muslims, whether they are righteous or they're not righteous. And this is due to the many proofs and evidences which point to this fact. The many proofs and evidences which point to this fact. From them, the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, as it comes in Saheeh Muslim, from the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Man ata'ani faqad ata'a Allah." That whoever obeys me, then verily he has obeyed Allah. وَمَنْ عَصَانِي فَقَدْ عَصَى اللَّهِ. And whoever has disobeyed me, then he has disobeyed Allah. وَمَنْ أَطَاعَ أَمِيرِي فَقَدْ أَطَاعَنِي. And whoever has obeyed my Amir, meaning whoever has obeyed the Muslim ruler, then he has obeyed me. وَمَنْ عَصَى أَمِيرِي فَقَدْ عَصَانِي. And whoever disobeys my leader, or meaning the Muslim leader, whoever disobeys the Muslim leader, then verily he has disobeyed me. And as we said, this hadith has been collected by Imam Muslim in his Sahih. There are many proofs and evidences which point to this fact, that it is not permissible for us to rebel against and to disobey the rulers, that we have to obey them, and that the prerequisite or the condition for their obedience will be that their obedience will have to be in compliance with obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As Allah ta'ala says, أَطِيعُوا اللَّهَ وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولَ وَأُولُو أَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ. Obey Allah and obey the Messenger and those who are in authority over you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made it binding upon us to obey Him, without condition. And Allah ta'ala made it binding upon us to obey His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam without condition. And this is why the word ati'ullah, or the word ati' is there. Obey Allah, ati'ullah, obey Allah. Then Allah Ta'ala repeats the command again, وَأَطِيعُوا الرَّسُولِ, and obey the messenger. But you find it is not repeated for a third time. It says, وَأُولُوا أَمْرِ مِنْكُمْ, and those who are in authority over you. So we understand from this the lack of it being repeated, أَطِيعُوا being repeated, that the obedience to those who are in authority over us is conditional, and is based upon compliance to obedience to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And also we understand this concept from the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, where he said, لا طاعة للمخلوق في معصية الخالق, that there is no obedience for the creation and disobedience to the Creator. So we understand from this that our obedience to the ruler, it will be conditional upon compliance to obedience to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they command us to do something that is haram, then we're not allowed to obey them in that particular command, in that particular order. Nah? But this doesn't remove the fact that we still have to listen and to obey them in everything else. Now, so if they tell us to do something that is haram, then we are not allowed to obey them in that particular command. But it doesn't remove us from having to obey them when the commands are in compliance to the deen of al-Islam. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he explained to us that there were going to come upon us rulers of which we will see from them things that we don't like. We will see from them things that will be wrong. We will see from them things that will be un-Islamic. The Prophet ﷺ, he explained to us that there will be rulers who would reach the office of rulership through un-Islamic means. The Prophet ﷺ, he said in the hadith, what means that the khilafah will be for 40 years. And then after that it will be muluk. The khilafah will be for 40 years. And then after that it will be kings. It will be kings. One ruler will become the ruler because he inherited the rulership, so on and so forth. And this will be something that would be prevalent. The Prophet ﷺ, he informed us of this, that this was going to take place, this was going to happen. But in any event, we still understand that we have to obey the ruler, even if they come there through un-Islamic means. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أُوصِيكُم بِتَقْوَى اللَّهِ وَالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ. He said, I advise you to fear Allah and to hear and to obey. وَإِن تَوَلَّ عَلَيْكُمْ عَبْدٌ. Even if a slave becomes your ruler. Now, even if a slave becomes your ruler. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ is telling us that there are going to be rulers who are going to reach rulership through un-Islamic means. Because there's no way possible for a slave to become our ruler except that what? That he had a coup and he took over the government. You don't go from being a slave one day to being the ruler the next day, except that you did what? Except that you had a revolution and you took over the government. You took it. Correct? Now, doing such things, taking over governments and the like, this is not Islamic. The Prophet ﷺ, he has prohibited us from doing this. But if one were to act in un-Islamic means and gain rulership by way of a coup, right, or whatever other un-Islamic means, as soon as they become the ruler, we still have to hear and obey. We still have to hear and obey. So even if they get there through un-Islamic means, we still have to obey them. So them getting there through legitimate Islamic means is not a condition for our obedience to them. As the Prophet ﷺ, he pointed out in this hadith, أُوصِيكُم بِالتَّقْوَى اللَّهِ وَالسَّمْعِ وَالطَّاعَةِ. I advise you to fear Allah and to hear and obey, even if a slave becomes your ruler. Now, ala kulli hal, to make this even more clear, it is like that which comes from the hadith of Salima radiyallahu ta'ala anha, where the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إِنَّهُ يُسْتَعْمَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَرَاء. He said that verily there will come leaders who will be appointed over you. Now, he says, فَتَعْرِفُونَ وَتُنْكِرُونَ. You will see from them doing good things and bad things. You will see from them things of which you will approve of and things of which you will not approve of. فَمَنْ أَنْكَرَ فَقَدْ سَلِمَ وَمَنْ كَرِهَ فَقَدْ بَرِئَ. So the one who disapproves for this evil that he sees them doing, right, and he disapproves of this evil in his heart and the like, then this one, he will be safe and upon him will be no blame. So the one who he hates the evil and he disapproves of the evil that he sees the rulers doing, then there will be no blame upon him and he will be safe. Now, so what is the Prophet ﷺ telling us now? That we're going to have leaders over us who what? Who may not necessarily be religious. Right? Meaning that they do a lot of bad things. Correct? But still, we are obliged to listen and to obey. We are obliged to not revolt against them. We are obliged not to revolt against them. And what makes this even more clear, as the hadith that goes on, and he says, وَلَكِنْ مَنْ رَضِيَ وَتَابَعَ. But, however, the ones who are pleased with the evil they see from the rulers, right? And they follow them in this evil and the like, then these ones, they are not safe and they are not free from blame. The ones who see the evil from the rulers, and he's pleased about it, and he follows it in it, then he's not safe and he's not free from blame. Now, but it's important to understand one thing. What is that? Yes, we don't love necessarily the rulers of this type, the rulers who have this characteristic, who they have with them many things that are contrary to Islam and the like, that we don't love them. Now, as Imam Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, the Imam of this particular work, he said a statement which is tremendous. He says, لا نحبهم. He said, we don't love them. Na'am. But at the same time, we don't لا نصبهم. لا نحبهم ولا نصبهم. He said, we don't love them, but at the same time, we don't speak bad about them. Right? That makes sense? We don't love them, but we don't speak bad about them. Just because we're not saying nothing, just because we ain't protesting. Why are we not protesting? Because the Prophet ﷺ told us not to. Why are we not saying anything? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he told us not to. He told us be patient. Be patient. Naam. So that's why we're not protesting. That's why we're not saying anything. But our silence is not a compliance. We're silent because the Prophet ﷺ, he told us to be silent. But this don't mean we love what they're doing from un-Islamic things. This don't mean we love what they're doing from things that are haram. La. لا نحبهم ولكن لا نصبهم. We don't love them, but we don't speak bad about them. This is the haqq. This is the way. But in any event, to make this even more apparently clear, or abundantly clear, those who heard this, the Sahaba, when they heard this statement from the Prophet ﷺ, they said, they said, أَفَلَا نُقَاتِلُهُمْ يَا رَسُولَ اللَّهِ. Ya Rasulullah, they said, O Messenger of Allah, should we fight them? If we see this is going to be their characteristic and the like, should we fight them? Right? Should we revolt? Should we fight them? The Prophet ﷺ, he said what? He said, La. No. Ma sallu. Huh? He said, La. Ma sallu. He said, no. Do not fight them as long as they're praying. Huh? Shay Azim. This is something that is tremendous. Because we learn a clear lesson from this, that as long as the rulers are those who pray, then it's not permissible for us to fight against them. Now, it's not permissible for us to fight against them. Shaykh Rabi' hafidhullah ta'ala, he says, فَمَا دَامُوا يُصَلُّونَ فَلَا يَجُوزُ الْخُرُوجَ عَلَيْهِمْ. He said, as long as they're praying, there is not permissible for us to revolt against them. He said, كَيْفَ إِذَا كَانَ يُصَلِّي وَيُصُومُ. He said, but what about the one who he prays and he fasts? Naam. And the one who gives zakat, and the one who makes the hajj. Subhanallah. Because you find that if you look at the rulers, not only do they pray, but they give zakat, they fast, they make hajj, so on and so forth. Naam. So how much more so now? Far is the opening from revolting and doing the likes of these evil things in which people do. We see from this hadith that this is something that is totally contrary to the sunnah, to revolt and to go against and to fight and to speak out against the rulers. Because the Prophet ﷺ in his hadith, he didn't tell us talk about them. He didn't tell us to get on the minbar and make khutbah about them. La. In other narrations, the Prophet ﷺ, he told us, be patient. Nah, be patient. And when it was asked, are we allowed to fight against them? The Prophet ﷺ, he said what? He said no. As long as they're praying, no. Do not fight them. Do not revolt. As long as they're praying, do not do this. The Shaykh, he says, أين نحن الآن? Where are we right now? من الثوريين, from the revolutionaries. الموجودين الآن. He said, where are we right now from this? From this understanding of what we learned from this hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that has been collected also by Muslim. He said, where are we from this concept and these modern day revolutionaries? These modern day revolutionaries. Now, and I'm pretty sure all of us have heard the likes of their kalam at one point or another, or have read the likes of their statements at one point or another. The Shaykh, he says, أَيْنَهُمْ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ صَلَى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمْ لَا مَا صَلُّوا. He said, where are they from the statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? No, do not fight them as long as they're praying. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made it clear to them. بَيَّنَهَا. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he made it clear to them. لَا مَا صَلُّوا. No, don't fight them as long as they're praying. Don't fight them as long as they're praying. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made this clear. This is clear. Na'am. This is clear. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ, he said that we are not to fight against them until what? حَتَّى تَرَوْا الْكُفْرِ الْبَوَاحِ. Don't fight them until you see clear kufr, clear apparent kufr that nobody debates about. Nah, nobody debates about. But if an individual is making a salah and so on and so forth, then what? We know that it's not him reaching that level. Nah. And listen, Shaykh Rabi', he says, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, La ma sallu. He said, no, don't fight them if they pray. مع أنهم فرطوا في كثير من الإسلام. He said, even though they may be neglectful of much of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, La ma sallu. No, don't fight them as long as they pray. La, don't fight them. The Shaykh, he says, ما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا ما أقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة وحجوا إلى آخر ذلك. He says, no, the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't say, as long as they establish the prayer and pay the zakat and make hajj to the end of that. He didn't say that. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, لا ما صلوا. No, do not fight them as long as they pray. The Shaykh, he says, لماذا? How come? He says, لأن الخروج يترتب عليه مفاسد. He said, because revolutions and revolting, that it brings along with it much harm. There's much harm that brings along with it. Now, so the Prophet ﷺ, he didn't allow the opening of this door of harm. Okay? He didn't allow the opening of this door of harm until it got so drastic that they didn't pray and they came with clear apparent kufr. You understand? Because revolutions, coups, forceful regime changes and the like, it carries with it much harm. Much harm. The Shaykh, he says, ضياع الإسلام وضياع المسلمين, from the loss of Islam, the loss of Muslims, meaning their lives, وإهلاك الأمة, and the destruction of the nations, وإهلاك الحرث والنسل, and from the destruction of agriculture and the like, agriculture and the yields from fruits and vegetables and produce and so on and so forth. والنسل, and also the nasl and nasl. Nasl is like offspring, right? Your progeny. Meaning what? Meaning the youth. The youth. When people have revolutions and they have coups and they form into militias, this militia fighting against the government and so on and so forth, who are the recruits for that? The young people. They don't go to the senior citizen home and say, hey, we got a truck full of guns, okay? We're going to take you out with your walkers and roll you out in your wheelchairs. Everybody grab a gun, we're about to go fight. They don't do that. Who gets killed? Young people, right? Young people. As the saying goes, the American saying, it goes what? Old people start wars, that young people dying. Right? This is the saying that they have here in America. That what? old people start wars, that young people die in. So this is what the Shaykh is saying, that you have this ihlak al-nasl, that the youth are going to perish because they're the ones that are going to get killed. They're the ones that are going to get killed. So now you have generations, or you have a large portion of the young generation dying. You understand? You understand war sets nations back. Because if all your young ones, all your strong, robust men from the youth, if they go off and they die in a conflict that started unnecessarily, un-Islamically, you understand? It's going to set that nation back at least 30 or 40 years. It's going to set them back. Right? Economically, it's going to set them back. Technologically, it's going to set them back. You understand? Because now, how can it be, how can it be production? Naam, jazakallah khair. How can it be production? How can the economy get better? Right? How can it be new inventions in the dunya and things like that? If all the young minds have been slaughtered. Those who haven't been slaughtered, then they have been affected adversely by war. The trauma of war that comes along with war. So basically when you go to war, that generation basically is gone. Can't count on them. Because they're either dead, right? Or they have suffered adversely from the war, or they have fled due to the war to other countries. So now, as opposed to helping the economy of their own country and helping their own country into progress, now they're become assets to whatever economies that they happen to be living amongst. You understand? If you look at what is going on, then you see this is the case. I give you, for example, Somalia. You look at Somalia. They started their war way back when. Okay? And then from that point, once they have ousted the government, then this basically has been the strongest, militia has been ruling. But like the Shaykh, he says, the problem with this is that sometimes you start a chain reaction. They make a coup, right? And then somebody else come and try to get the power back, or someone else feel we have more rights, so they need to make another coup, which is going to return in retaliation, another coup, and then another coup, another coup, another coup, another coup, now Somalia. Where they say you have more Somalian nationals living outside of Somalia than actually in Somalia. Yeah. We have a large number of our Somali brothers and sisters living here in the US. A large number of them living in Canada. A large number of them living in Britain and spread out across the European Union, who are working, who are contributing to societies and so on and so forth. Now, so basically who are helping the economies of whatever local place that they're living in. It's not trickling back to Somalia. And where's the proof? The proof is in the pudding. Look at the country. Still. This is what happens when you open up this door of revolution. This is what happens. It doesn't bring to anything good. It sets people back. The progress halts. It stops. And not just that, because that as bad as it is, as bad as that is, okay? This is not the most dangerous effects of the likes of these things. But now people's deeds are adversely affected. People's religions are adversely affected. How are you going to gain knowledge of the religion and so on and so forth, and bullets is flying, bombs are dropping, people are being killed, right? How are you going to excel, increase in the religion, and you're living amongst this situation, and so on and so forth? The person who wasn't good, how's he going to get good in light of this type of situation? It becomes difficult. That's why the Shaykh says the Islam, the Islam of a generation is adversely affected. Adversely affected. Now, and blood. The Muslims will be killed. People will be slaughtered. When people have wars, soldiers aren't the only ones who die. Okay? Soldiers are not the only ones who die. Children get caught in the crossfire. They die. Women get killed. You open the door for lawless, evil individuals to come in and to commit evil acts, crimes against humanity, against the population. So you hear stories of women being raped, gang raped, and then killed. Some gang rapes, mutilated, and then left to live. Children being killed, forcefully drafted into conflicts and the like. Young soldiers. All of these things are not good. But all of these things are a result of what? What was the catalyst that led to the likes of these situations? The revolution. You understand? No matter how bad the ruler may have been, as long as he's praying, as long as he's a Muslim, right? He's Muslim, he's praying and the like. No matter how bad he may have been, you will find so many people after the revolution saying what? Things were better before. Things were better before. When we had that ruler. Before they revolted. Before they fought. Before they did these un-Islamic things. Things were actually better. There were some bad things during them times, but it's not like now. It's not like now when you go downtown to buy vegetables and there's a truck there with a gun stand on it. When you go to the souk and you have a tank there, you have to walk by armed guards and so on and so forth. Fighting can break out at any time. There's no safety, no security, no peace. So yes, that person has some issues. And it was, we had some problems in that time, but not like now. Not like now. Now, and there are too many examples really for us to even get into. Too many examples. If you look at what had taken place in Egypt, is a perfect example for this. Perfect example. You had the brothers and sisters informing that now, although things have gotten a little better, it's not as good as before. Before, you didn't have to constantly be on your P's and Q's. You didn't have to constantly watch your back and things like this. You didn't have to worry about lawlessness, gangs running around, robbing and killing and so on and so on. You didn't have to worry about that. When I lived there, we could leave our door unlocked. Nobody would come in your door. It was even times where they would put the screen. It's not a screen, but like a net. You have like a net. You hang in front of the door, right? You will leave the door open all day, so fresh air come in and so on and so forth. All day. You didn't even have to worry about people walking by your house and looking in. No worry about that. You can go to the masjid, leave your house in that state, come back, not even worry about somebody going to walk in. The only thing you had to worry about coming in your house was the cat or the chicken from the roof. That's it. Really, that's the only problem you had. The cat might have came in. The neighborhood cat might have came in. The chicken from the roof might have came downstairs and came inside your house. That's the only problem you had. Now, it's not the case. People are locking their doors with every boat that they have. The security has gone away. What was the catalyst for that? These revolutions. So this is why the Prophet ﷺ, he said, look, as long as they pray, don't do it. Don't revolt. As long as they're praying, don't revolt. Why? Because with revolutions and revolting, there comes much harm. Much harm. The Shaykh, he says, وَانْتِهَاكَ الْأَعْرَابِ and that people's reputations and the like will be violated. People will be violated. Naam. وَإِذْلَالِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ and that the Muslims, they will be subjugated. They will be humiliated. They will be put down and degraded and the like. وَإِضَعَافِهِمْ and they will be made weak. The Muslims will be made weak. You and I know the situation right now. Right? Let's go back to Egypt, for example. They had one of the largest, or if not the largest army in the Middle East from the Muslims. Correct? We're not advocating any wars or anything like this. We're not advocating any wars or anything like this. But if Israel, if they were to attack Egypt 6 months ago, a year ago, right? That would have been a tremendously difficult fight for them. one of which they may have lost. Right? Because the Muslims in Egypt had beaten them in the past in war. You with me? Everybody with me? Later. When you have these revolutions and the like, it weakens the nation. Right now, today, if Israel was to say, forget it, we're going to launch all out war against Egypt, do you think Egypt will win? Allahu A'lam, but it doesn't seem likely. Doesn't seem likely that they will win. Why? Because they have been weakened. They have been weakened. Okay? The country is not like it was before. The stability is not there. So it brings to a weakened state. You understand? Now if you add Egypt to all the region, and the conflict of the region and so on and so forth, do you realize that as Muslims we're actually in a weaker state than we were before all these things? If you add to the problems in Bahrain, if you add to the problems that have been going on in Iraq since the war began there, if you add the problems that are now raising their head in Syria, the problems that are raising their head in Yemen, the problems in Libya, right? The problems in Somalia, if you go down a little more, the problems that they were having inside of Sudan, the civil war that was there. You understand? Add all these together. This is us. We're not talking about other people. This is us, the Muslims. As a region now, do we seem like we in tip-top shape, or do we seem very weak? That anybody could just come now and defeat us? Right? You tell me. We sound strong? Or we sound like we need peace right now because we can't handle the fight? Huh?
Fragile.
Very fragile right now. We were definitely more stable and stronger in those times as opposed to right now. So even with those baggage, because again, we're not denying the fact that there may be some things that are incorrect. No one is denying this. The Prophet ﷺ told us it will be like this. So we believe it's going to be like this. Right? And when we see these things, we know this is a testament to the prophethood of the Prophet ﷺ, because he told us it's going to be like that. He told us it's going to be like that. Now, but the reality of it is that there's nothing like safety and stability. That's the reality. There's nothing like safety and stability. Because in safety and stability, you can reach things and you can have progress that you can't have when there's no safety and there's no stability. You will have a strength that you won't have when there's no safety and there's no stability. So right now, as bad as people may have made it seem that it wasn't, so on and so forth, we were stronger before the likes of these things than we are now. Now, yes, you're talking about how they were from before. Imagine what now that our enemies can do now. You understand? Imagine what they can do now. Now it's even 10 times worse, because now you don't have just one, particular issue or set of issues, set of circumstances. Now you have multiple issues and multiple set of circumstances. It's not as simple as because now you have this fraction against this fraction and so on and so forth. And now it's bigger. Now it's bigger. You have added to the complexity of an already bad situation. And then at the end of the day, what's going to happen is what? It's not going to be any change. There's not going to be any real change. It'll be some minor things, yes. It'll be some topical things that will be changed, yes. But for lack of a better term, if there was a puppeteer, is the puppeteer going to change? No, just the puppet is going to change. You understand? So when you look at it from this standpoint, do you realize what's the sense of shedding the blood, destroying the property, losing the generation, making instability, taking away the peace, so on and so forth? What's the sense if you're doing things that don't bring about any real change? What's the real change? The real change is, as the Prophet ﷺ, he explained to us the real change was going to be. Where the Prophet ﷺ, he said that Allah Ta'ala, sallallahu alaykum, then Allah Ta'ala will put upon you humiliation. Allah will humiliate you. If Allah humiliates us, who can give us power and might? Nobody. Now, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, when? حَتَّى تَرْجِعُوا إِلَى دِينِكُمْ, until you return to your religion. Until you return to it. When you return to your religion, then what happens? Then the humiliation lifts. Right? So if an individual understood this correctly, then he'll realize that the solution is not in revolution. The solution is returning to the deen. Because as is well known, كَمَا تَكُونُوا تَوَلُّوا عَلَيْكُمْ. The way that you are, your leaders are going to be the same way. People blame the leaders. This person not ruling by Islam. But if you look at most of us, we ain't ruling ourselves by Islam. You're going to blame this guy for not ruling a country by Islam, a land by Islam, but then we're not ruling our house by Islam. We ain't ruling our wife by Islam. We ain't ruling our kids by Islam. We ain't ruling ourselves by Islam. Then we're going to blame this guy. Right? When the reality of it is that he is from us, we're not from him. Rulers come from us. We don't come from rulers. You understand? Like I'm not a kid of any ruler. But you will find that the ruler, he will come from who? From the population. He will come from the people. So if the population is good, then the rulers are going to be good. Why? Because the rulers are going to come from that population. You understand? Like a person in France, he don't get a person from Belgium to be the ruler. People in Belgium, they don't ask the people in Ireland to come be their rulers. No, you find that generally the rulers are from those people. You with me? So if those people are good, the ruler is going to be good. If those people are bad, the ruler is going to be bad. If those people are corrupt, the ruler is going to be corrupt. If those people are bad, and you make a revolution to get rid of a bad guy, then who are you going to replace him with? But another bad guy. Maybe one slightly better, maybe one slightly worse. But you're still in the same ballpark, basically. Because the real change, it doesn't come from revolutions, but the real change, it comes from returning to our religion. Returning to our religion and being firm upon the Islam. And then we will see the change. But the likes of these things, then no. The Shaykh, he says that it would weaken us to the extent, he said, حَتَّى يَصْبَحُوا لُقْمَةً سَائِغَةً. He said, until we become like a luqma sa'ira. Until we become like a tasty meal. For who? For us? La. لِأَعْدَائِنَا. Until we become like a tasty meal for our enemies. This is what happens. If you think that we were somewhat exploited before, imagine now. Imagine the exploitation now. Imagine the leverage now that the enemies of the Muslims have over them. Your government is in shambles. Your country is in shambles and rubble. You want some money? You want some aid? You want to rebuild? Okay. Here go my ball of yarn. I was talking about a string attached. Alright? Here go a ball of yarn. You can have the money. But it comes at a price. So if you think you was complaining then, imagine how much more you're going to complain after that. So you realize that the only real way of any change is the Islamic way. That's it. It's the Islamic way. And this is why the ulama, they have gone to great measures to explain this reality. This is why the Prophet ﷺ has gone to great measures to explain this reality that we have to hear and we have to obey. We have to hear and we have to obey. The Shaykh, he says that when that this bad situation happens, when there's a revolution and the like, he says, وَالْآنْ يَا الْإِخْوَةِ هَؤُلَاء الثَّوْرِيُّونَ قَامَتْ لَهُمْ دَوْلَةً عَنْ طَرِيقِ الْإِنْقِلَابِ. He said, now you find that these revolutionaries, they have formed governments by way of coup, or al-inqirabat, by way of coups, inqirabat, coups, right, takeovers, or tariq al-intikhabat, or by way of voting, wa an tariq kada wa kada, all these various things. Now, as you see what happens, they get rid of one ruler, right? They have a coup, then what comes after the coup? Then you vote, correct? And so on and so forth. Now, but I want you to listen now. Shaykh says, وَمَاذَا صَنَعُوا? What do they do? When they had this coup, it's coup, voting, new government. Right? That's usually how it goes in modern times, as the Shaykh explained, right? Coup, voting, new government. He said, but with all that, what did they do? What really did they do? مَاذَا حَقَّقُوا? What did they do? مِنْ شَعَرَاتِ هَذِهِ. From all these things, what did they accomplish? all these things, what did they really accomplish? In reality, what did they really accomplish? The Shaykh, he says that you'll find that these particular individuals, هؤلاء أبعد الناس عن التطبيق الشرعية الإسلامية. He said you will find that these people who have these revolutions and the like, that they are from the furthest people who implement Islam. They are from the furthest people who implement Islam. And what's the proof of this? The proof of this is them themselves. If you read through the headlines, if you read through the internet and so on and so forth, these stories, you follow these stories and these headlines, you'll find in each and every one of these revolutions, what are the people, what are the revolutionaries saying? This is not an Islamic revolution. This is what they're saying. Is this not what they said in Egypt? This is not an Islamic revolution. This is an Egyptian revolution. A democratic revolution. Is this not what they said in Tunisia? This is a democratic revolution. Is this not what they're saying now in Libya? Is that an Islamic revolution? No, it's not an Islamic revolution. This is a democratic movement, which we want democracy. Ain't nobody screaming Islam. So why is it we use Islam as an excuse to make a revolution and then call the revolution un-Islamic? Oh, he don't rule by the Islam, he don't do this, he don't do that. Let's make a revolution. Oh yeah, by the way, this ain't no Islamic revolution, we want democracy. So the Shaykh, as he say, أبعد الناس من أبعد الناس عن التطبيق الشرعي. They from the furthest people from implementing the Islamic way. From the furthest people. So the Shaykh, he says, rather بل يزيدون على حكام الآخرين المنحرفين. He said, but rather they're taken into other ways, other ways that are astray, other ways that are un-Islamic and the like. This is what they do. So they don't want Islam. They say, no, we want democracy. We rule our country by democracy and the like. And not just that, but also بالعقد المؤتمرات وحدة الأديان. But then they move into these things where they start having talks and cooperations for what? For one religion, to bring religions together, unity of religions. We take it back to Egypt for an example. When they start saying what? Say no, Islamic revolution. This is an Egyptian revolution. This is revolution for the Egyptians, the Muslims from amongst them, and the Christians. We won. We see this every day. We don't need to do research and so on and so forth to come to these. We see this. We hear this from their claims. This is what they're telling us. We don't have to even search for these things. This is what they present to us, because this is the reality of the situation. And when you understand the situation being as such, that you will have the likes of these revolutions where the Muslims' blood will be spilled. And what is not to say that other people who are living there also are not harmed. We're not trying to say that. But look at the atrocities that happen to the Muslims. Look at the loss of Islam, the loss of a generation, the weakening of the Ummah, and the like. And then that to be chased up and to be replaced by the establishment of un-Islamic governments, by the establishment of governments who they themselves admit that they were not an Islamic government, were another type of government. Then you will realize that the revolution, which was a catalyst for all of these things, obviously is not something that's good. Obviously is not something that's good for the Muslims. Obviously is not something that's from Islam, because all of its fruits are un-Islamic, against Islam and against the Muslims. Which is going to just do what? This is going to continue in the preparation of the cycle, because then when people wake up 20 years from now, 25 years from now, 30 years from now, and realize this is the same thing that happened before, then what's going to happen? Now the shaitan comes back in, he said, hey, revolt again. Get rid of him, do somebody else, and now the 20, 30 year cycle starts again. Alright? Go back to Egypt, for example. They revolted against the king, got rid of him. Then came Jamal Abdul Nasser. But yeah, he passed away. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Then there came Siddiq. He was murdered, assassinated. Wasn't happy, assassinated him. Rahimahullah ta'ala. Then they came Husni Mubarak. And we saw what just happened to him. So obviously, with all those 3 revolutions, they have yet to get it right. There was no real change. They still had grievances that they felt they had to do a revolt to get rid of the government. So now what's going to happen is that, and Allah Ta'ala of course knows best, the next one to come is not going to be far from those who preceded him. So what are we talking, another 30 years or so? Did we do the same thing again? Right? Then what's going to be the progress? What's going to be the stability? It's not. This is from the shaitan. The Shaykh, he says also what happens is as you find tashdid al-kana'is, that you start erecting churches and things like this, that is usually you find what happens after these revolutions. Churches start to be, more churches start to go up. Wa taqrib al-nasara, and they start to develop open relationships and drawing close to Nasara. Wa idlal al-muslimin, and they put the Muslims down. And many of us, we've seen this all the time. Again, we're not advocating to be bad and rude to people. No, we're not advocating that. We're not. But sometimes you find the Muslims in their enthusiasm, in their vigor, to show that they're nice to the Christians, and as the non-Muslims, they do what? They put the Muslims down. You see this all the time, don't you? We see here in the masjid, brothers come in the masjid and talk to you like you dirt. They write an email against you and talk to you like you dirt. Then they go smile in the face of every kafir they meet. Now we're not saying that you go and spit in the face of the kuffar. La. Show them the good of Islam. But what about your brothers? Your brothers don't deserve anything from the good akhlaq, the Islamiyya? Yeah, subhanallah. What about your brothers? Naam. Do you see how the shaitan, he messes with the minds of the people and the mentalities of the people by way of these revolutions and all of the evil fruits that come from them? And this is why the people of the Sunnah, they constantly remind of that which the Prophet ﷺ, he taught us with regards to the realities of these things, that they don't have attached to them anything of good. The Shaykh, he says, وَإِفْقَارِهِ, and also the impoverishment of the Muslims. وَإِهْلَاكُهُمْ, and their destruction. فِي دِينِهِمْ وَدُنْيَاهُمْ, the destruction that takes place in their religious affairs and in their worldly affairs. In their religious affairs and in their worldly affairs. The Shaykh, he says, and then by Allah وصلوا بالانتخابات ووصلوا بانقلابات ووصلوا بشتى الأمور وشاركوا في وزارات كله كلام فارغ ما يتميز على غيرهم في شيء. The Shaykh, he says, and then he said by Allah, wallah, he said then they reach the elections, they have the elections, or they reach this rulership by way of coups, and they reach it by many different avenues and many different ways, and so on and so forth. And you find that those ones who are vying for leadership, those ones who are vying for the kursi, that they whether they get there by way of the voting and elections, or they get there by coups and revolutions and so on and so forth. He said that you find these individuals, they have much speech, much empty speech. Like they say, campaign promises. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to reform this, I'm going to reform that. All this kalam, all this speech, all this talk, all this. Then the Shaykh, he says, but in reality nothing is accomplished. Nothing is accomplished, and they don't do anything. They don't do anything that sets them aside from other than them. Everyone who's a dictator right now, if you go back far enough, he used to be loved by his people. If you go back far enough, he was saying all the stuff they wanted to hear. But then what was the reality? What was the result? Nothing. All these people they want to kick out now, or they just recently kicked out, at a time they loved them. Had all this stuff, all this kalam, what they're going to do, how it's going to be better, What do we see from it? Nothing. Nothing is seen from it. There's no fruits from it. Why? Because You built your house on chaos. You think it's going to come order from it? No. Never happens. Never happens. And the Prophet ﷺ, is this how he established Islam? Is this how he established peace in Mecca and in Medina and in the Arabian Peninsula? It is how peace was established? Because soon as Sahaba got a little bit strong in Mecca, they started doing terroristic things against the Quraysh. Is that what happened? Was they sitting in Dar al-Arqam talking about, yeah, we're going to start robbing people and we're going to start killing people at nighttime and doing assassination, take out the leadership, and then we're going to take Mecca? Is that what they did? No. That's not what they did, because this is not from Islam. Did they just run up to Medina and say, look, we just taking Medina now, that's it. We got no win in Mecca, we're going to take Medina? Nah. That's not what they did, because that's not from Islam. The Prophet ﷺ, what did he do? He took his time and he gave da'wah. He called the people to Islam to rectify their aqidah. If a person is not giving Allah Ta'ala his rights, why do you think he's going to give you your rights? If a person is not giving Allah his rights, why do you think justice is going to be established on the earth? It's not going to be established on the earth. So the Prophet ﷺ, he could rectify the aqidah. He rectified the minhaj of the common people. You understand? Because if the common people is believing correctly, the common people are those who are upright, who are just, who are righteous, and so on and so forth, and that spreads and it spreads and it spreads and it spreads, and by default, eventually then what? Then the rulers will become right. Because it's not an Islamic objective to establish Muslim countries. People may say, what? No, it's not an Islamic objective to establish a Muslim state. A Muslim state comes later. Allah blesses us with that as a reward for our righteousness and so on and so forth. But it's not our objective to establish a state. It's our objective to be righteous and upright. That's our objective. And to give da'wah to this so that this spreads. Now, as a default, from the fruits of that is that what? Then the state comes. You didn't even ask for it. The state comes. The Sahaba, they took over the Arabian Peninsula. Islam spread all over. Into Egypt, into Spain, different parts of Africa, North Africa, so on and so on. It spread. This is the reward when you worry about the religion, worried about the deen. If it was an objective of Islam to establish an Islamic state, then Musa wa Harun alayhim salatu wassalam, after they saw Fir'aun and his army die, Allah Ta'ala informs us that they saw them die and they saw them drown, and they were looking. After they saw them die, Musa ﷺ and Harun ﷺ, they were from the most intelligent of people, from the most intelligent human beings you ever know, from the best human beings you ever could know. Right? They were intelligent, they were smart. If it was an objective and they saw that the ruler, all his army, all his noblemen, they're all dead right now. If the objective was to establish a state, then what's the logical course of action at that time? Everybody turn around, we're going back to Egypt because they're all dead. We're going to go back to Egypt and take it over. Correct? But they didn't do that. Why? Because this is not from the Islam. It's not the Islamic objective. Islam, as Muslims, we don't spread chaos. We don't spread chaos. It's not from Islam to spread chaos. So Musa ﷺ, Harun ﷺ, they went on doing that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had commanded them to do. There's so many benefits that we learn. And you can tell the falseness and the falsity of the way of the revolutionaries is that they're examples, they're role models, people they look up to and take as sources of inspiration. Not a single one of them is a prophet. Not a single one of them is one of the Sahaba. Not a single one of them is one of the Imams of Al-Islam. You don't find nobody talking about, yeah, we're going to do a revolution because, like Imam Ahmed was talking about, like Imam Malik and them was saying, and like Imam Shafi'i was saying, and so on, like Imam Abu Hanifa was saying. Why? Because all of them told you the opposite, told you be patient, listen and obey. Don't have revolutions, don't revolt. They were teaching the Sunnah. So you don't find any examples from them. Nor from Sufyan al-Thawri. Nor from Sufyan al-Juyaanee. Huh? You keep going on and on and on and on and on. From the A'imma. No examples from them. So who are the examples? A lot of times the examples not even Muslim. We have to be wise. We have to be smarter than that. When you look at things and you look at it and you add up all the factors, you realize this is not from Islam. Because if it was, then we will have some examples from the prophets and the messengers. We will have statements from the Prophet ﷺ. We will have examples from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'een, Atba Tabi'een, from the A'imma, the Deen. We will have examples of how we're going to run our revolution, but there's no examples. Why? Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, La ma sallu, don't fight them as long as they praying. Because that's Islam. Ala kulli hal, we went longer than we had intended to go. فنكتفي بهذا القدر وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.